All right, my friends, it is time for another AMA. Hello from beautiful Florence, Italy. Doing this like Switzerland plus Italy trip, primarily to see the Formula One Grand Prix, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, with Hamilton being a Ferrari. Of course, had to do that this year, but as you guys may know, Ferrari's not doing too well, but it's still a great trip nonetheless. And you guys have some questions, very thoughtful stuff as always. I look forward to doing these because you all ask such thoughtful questions. So let's dive in. What kind of side hustles are realistic during med school and residency? This is from Random Freeman 98. That's a good question. I think the first thing that comes up for me, and probably for many of you, is actually doing some kind of social media, having a following, being an influencer, and monetizing that. If you do want to do that, remember to first provide value and do good by your audience, because if you do those two things, then everything else tends to follow. People obsess over tactics when it's like, you just focus on those two things, and then the business deals or sponsorships or whatever you want to do after that will follow as well. If you do those two things, which is, again, provide value and do good by your audience. Don't sell them snake oil. There's also doing admissions consulting and tutoring. That's actually what the insiders do at Med School Insiders. We have med students, residents, and attendings who actually provide those services to our clients. And then as a resident, oftentimes after PGY1, you can do some moonlighting. And that's going to be a good use of your time in terms of your hourly rate. It's going to be much higher there versus doing most other things on the side. But keep in mind, what is the long-term goal? Because moonlighting is going to be short-term, immediate exchange of time for money at a pretty decent hourly rate. But depending on what your goals are, doing something like creating a social media following on Instagram or YouTube, etc., could better align with your long-term goals, even if immediately you don't make any money. And maybe you actually lose money from your initial cost because you have to buy editing equipment, cameras, etc., and you don't actually monetize until much later down the road. For those that do want to know more about doing side hustles in med school and residency, and also those who want to know about social media in particular, then I actually have this new course coming out. It's called The Unhappy Doctor Solution, and you can learn more linked in the description. Sarah BN6CU, given how the amount of sacrifice needed to even go into medicine in the first place, what degree of confidence do you think pre-med students need to have in order to decide on med school? Basically, does one have to be extremely confident in this decision in order to make it? And do you think the end of college and MCAT burnout might influence that decision accidentally, if that makes sense? Another question is, do you think lacking people skills or struggling with it generally means that medicine is not a good career path? And finally, what options are out there for those who sought medicine all their lives and made it big up until the last couple of years of undergrad, and all of a sudden it's getting too much and they're worried that they won't be able to handle medicine at all? Specific question here because speaking from experience, don't know if I can handle this hustle culture for 9 more years. Sarah, awesome, thoughtful question. So I do think, and I do emphasize that pre-meds need to have a high degree of confidence about whether or not they want to do medicine before committing, because once you enter med school and you take on those student loans, it's a lot harder to leave. If you are in the position where you don't have to take big student loans, scholarship, family help, etc., then that can actually reduce the risk of going to med school and then changing your mind later on. I do think that being burnt out after grinding through college and pushing hard on the MCAT and feeling a bit tired can definitely influence how you feel about it. And you may want to take a little bit of a breather, take some time. You don't have to rush into it. You can take a gap year. I think so many of us type A personalities are always like one in front of the other, marching towards this destination. And we don't even want to stop to take a breather, which can sometimes be very beneficial to give us that clarity. So don't be afraid to do that. And before a pre-med does commit to med school, I think they should look at other opportunities out there, see what might interest them if they didn't do medicine, and then also make sure they are getting exposure to different types of medicine that might appeal to them. Surgical versus non-surgical, outpatient versus inpatient, so on and so forth. We have a video on the Med School Insiders channel on how to choose a specialty. So you're not going to know what your specialty is as a pre-med, but that's going to at least get you in the right direction on what you should be considering. And maybe you want to get some exposure through research or shadowing, etc., to see what it's about, because what you see on TV is obviously not reality. And by the way, I actually created a quiz for this. It's at specialtyquiz.com, and you answer about 30 questions, and they'll give you, based on 9 different personality traits, things like how much you like working with your hands to risk aversion, things like that, which specialties may be best suited for your personality. So you can check that out for free at specialtyquiz.com. The people skills and struggling with it, I generally think that almost anything is a learnable skill. Obviously, your height is not a learnable skill, but when it comes to people skills, when it comes to sociability and public speaking and interpersonal relationships and charisma, I think all of those things are learnable skills. It's just funny that we assume it's fixed, even though we acknowledge that basketball or some instrument, learning violin is something that you can intentionally work on and improve. We don't think the same for social skills. It absolutely is the case. And while I do think having good people skills makes for more effective doctors in most specialties, you also don't have to be like top 5% people skills in order to be a good physician. Definitely not. And as for the last part of your question, it's so common to feel burned out and to feel tired after grinding through college and taking your MCAT and getting to the point where you can now apply to med school. Keep in mind, more than 50% of pre-meds are taking gap years before they start med school. So don't be afraid to take some time off. Make sure that you're confident about the decision before you commit. Kaya Presley, I've been watching your videos for some time and admire how thoughtful and clear you are when approaching all sorts of topics. While this isn't something you typically focus on, I'd love to get your advice on it. How do you get started thinking more deeply about topics so that you can have meaningful intellectual conversations with others? I'm not sure if it's a quarter-life crisis or just late self-awareness, but I feel like this is a skill I never really developed growing up. My past SOs have been very intellectually driven and valued thought-provoking discussions, great at bouncing ideas around, and following threads and digging deeper, while I often felt like I got lost, derailed, or said something that didn't really fit. I'm more naturally wired towards emotional insight and the nurturing, caring aspect in a relationship dynamic, so I feel like I can't keep up in those kinds of conversations even though I really want to. And I wouldn't want to be the reason why a relationship would end. Guys, I love your questions. They're so thought-provoking. First of all, I'm a complete amateur at this, so I'll tell you what I'm doing to work on this. And the reason I say I'm an amateur is because when you find these podcasters or writers who are really good thinkers, you think, wow, like that is so impressive. That's inspiring. So point number one is to find those inspiring thinkers, whether that's blogs, podcasts, videos, etc., books as well. Because it starts getting you to think in that way. And when you're not reading or not listening to them, and you're just in Florence, Italy, observing things, you'll start noticing stuff that you may not have noticed before. But that brings me to point number two, which is that you don't only want to focus on those people that you relate to most, because that's the common trap that the majority of people fall into. And it limits your thinking, right? Because you only grow and can pressure test your ideas and become a clearer and better thinker by seeing the holes in your understanding. So as an example, one thing that I think is quite sad is how politics can be so divisive. I wish more people would look at each individual issue on its own and talk about the merits of the pros and cons. I think having a conversation with someone about a single issue, pros and cons, or even with ChatGPT now, which is what I will do, I'm like, hey, here's what I think about insert controversial issue, gun control, or insert controversial topic. Here are the points that I believe straw man and strong man this. And ChatGPT will do such a good job and point out things that you would not have considered. I think if you're aware of that human bias to be more tribal and to think us versus them, in-group versus out-group, and say, if you're not with us, you're against us, that's what you want to avoid, because that prevents you from actually thinking. And if you find people who are super left or super right, you'll notice that their beliefs are generally 100% aligned with that political party. But then if you zoom out and you think, well,
hold on a second.
What are the chances that out of the 7+ billion people on the planet, that you and you and you and you and these various people all aligned on the exact same belief on these 50 different issues? Isn't that interesting? There's absolutely no way that they arrived to those conclusions with independent thought, for them to all have the same alignment of 50 issues. What happened is that they took on identity, right? The identity politics, the us versus them. I am a insert, Democrat versus Republican, and therefore I believe this set of beliefs. And I think that's a very weak way of approaching the world. It's very flawed. It makes society far more divisive. It makes you far weaker of a thinker. You're just like not a serious thinker if you do that. So be mindful of that. ChatGPT actually has kind of revolutionized this, but the other thing I would add is I find a lot of value in just talking to friends about this kind of stuff. And some friends are going to resonate with it more. And I have other friends who, I've tried it once or twice. It didn't really go anywhere. That's okay. I'm like, these friends are about vibes. These friends are about getting nerdy about whatever conversation I want to have. And that's cool. Don't be afraid to explore that with people. And like we just talked about, you said this is a skill. I like that you said this is a skill, because skills we can learn and we can improve on. God, you guys ask such good questions. Garrett Dies, a lot of questions about maturity, the soul searching involved in making decisions about giving time to career/school versus relationships. specifically intimate relationships. I think all young people who want a family someday struggle with this when confronted with a demanding career path, especially women due to having to make that decision earlier than men, due to, of course, biological reasons. The soul searching involved in making the decision about choosing a specialty, which takes up so much of your life, such as surgery, how can one know if it's worth it to do so? And there are plenty of surgeons who are happy, but there are plenty who are not. How do you find people throughout your journey who really wanted what was best for you and connected with you on a deep level? It's so hard to find. This is true in medicine, where there are many high-achieving types. It almost implies competitiveness, which can be healthy or unhealthy with your peers. This is really good. This is a really good question. There's some advice I received when I was in high school from my cousin's friend, and this is a guy who I looked up to. And he told me, because maybe I had just gotten into a relationship in high school, and he's like, hey, Kevin, don't get distracted too much by girls until you first get your shit done. And if I'm being honest, like, I'm not sure how much that influenced me because I've always been very focused on the grind. But I think that is good advice for someone in high school to hear, because it is very easy to get derailed by things like relationships, especially when you're in high school. As you get older to your 20s, I think there is still value to pushing very, very hard to see what you're made of. And not because you want to do that for the rest of your life, but because you now have the capability and the skill set and the work ethic to say, when things get tough or when I need to have a season of pushing hard, I can do so because I've done it before. So as you do that, when the right person comes along, and whether that is you going out and being more intentional about your dating or just by chance, either is fine depending on what your priorities are at the time, then you're going to find a way to fit them into your life. And if they are the right person for you, then they're going to be understanding that this might be a busier season, a more of a grind season for your life. It's like a false dichotomy to say that you can either grind hard or be in an intimate relationship. I think you can do both. It's not either or. You just have to find the right person, assuming that you want to grind hard and you want to see what you can achieve and push yourself. And if you don't want to, that's totally fine. There's no judgment about that. Now, you commented on especially women because of the biological reasons. That's a tough and very complicated thing. I've been listening to a lot of Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom. His podcast, he gets into a lot of evolutionary psychology and just, dating dynamics and mating and things like that. And it's very fascinating about how, it's awesome that women have made this progress in the workplace and they have more autonomy and they can pursue their professional aspirations. But there have been unintentional downsides in terms of family life, right? So one thing that I had never considered before listening to some of these episodes was how a certain subset of women are in their 40s or 50s and they mourn the families that they could have had but never did. And that's so sad to think about, right? Because they were just so focused on their career at the time. So I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a complex issue. I know what works for what has helped me as a man is mentors, people who are ahead of me in life that I look up to, speaking to them at length, building those relationships. And I invite the women who are watching to comment below. The first thing that I can just think of is those women who are balancing the career versus family priorities is also reach out to their mentors, the people who are ahead of them in life, who they look up to and want to be like. It's a very tricky thing. Don't just look at those who are successful, because if you look at the most professionally successful person, they may have a lot of success in the professional domain, but what does their personal life look like? So you want to find the person who has the kind of balance that you aspire to have yourself. Now, onto the soul searching part. I think a lot of us, myself included, hate uncertainty. I'm actually, between going to Switzerland and Italy, I'm reflecting on my own personality and my own tendencies, because now that I'm older, now that I've been traveling more, I'm finding out what kind of countries resonate with me more or less. And Japan is top tier. Switzerland was really high up there, except the food didn't resonate with me as much, but the people were super friendly. By the way, shout out to Roman, the med student who stopped me to say hello in the streets of Zurich the day we arrived. Sometimes I forget that we have viewers over in Europe as well. And super friendly people. And, Roman was awesome. Everyone that we met in Switzerland was incredible. But the thing that really stands out to me and how it reflects back on my own personality and preferences is structure, orderliness, timeliness. Whereas we went to Italy and at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, there's a little bit more chaos, right? The Italian people aren't quite as structured and regimented and organized as Germans and Swiss. And it's all on a spectrum. There's shades to this, right? Because as humans, we don't like uncertainty. So I can totally relate to what you're going through right now with regards to choosing surgery, because I was there. I remember, I think it was mostly third year, oh my God, do I want to do surgery? Because all the advice you hear is that only do surgery if you can't imagine doing anything else, because the sacrifice and the price of surgery is so high. And yeah, I was going back and forth, and I wasn't sure until I got into the OR. I was like, wow, I love this. And then you guys know how the story ends, which is that I quit. So like, there is so much uncertainty in life. It's an equation that you cannot solve, and that's okay. You have to be okay with the discomfort of some uncertainty. So when it comes to surgery, your third year, when you rotate, that's going to be the single most important time for you to decide whether or not you want to do surgery. And the surgeons who are happy versus not, I think you should reach out to them, speak to them, see what are the patterns that you notice that make them happy versus less happy. Because what you'll see if your experience is anything like mine is that you'll find not just happy and unhappy surgeons, but happy and unhappy doctors as well. And I think there are so many reasons for that. Maybe that's a video that we can explore either on this channel or on Med School Insiders in the future. And the last part was finding people who really want what was best for you. I think what you have to do is don't go to people and say, hey, I want you to be my mentor. Like, what's in it for them? They're kind of like, oh shit, there's a lot of like work for me to do. What am I getting out of this, right? As humans, we don't like to admit this, but everything is transactional. You have relationships with friends because you get some value out of that. They make you happy. You're excited to spend time with them. You have fun with your significant other. You enjoy dating them. There's value. It's not like if it was a terrible experience and you did not enjoy spending time with them, you did not enjoy sleeping next to them, you did not enjoy talking to them, et cetera, then why would you be dating them, right? So we don't like to admit this because it sounds like an uncomfortable truth, but relationships and much of our human existence is very transactional. So with a mentor, the best mentors that I found were those who I said, hey, let me work really hard to impress this person. And let's say in research, as an example, I worked my butt off on research. Research is a grind. And at the beginning in college, I really sucked at it. It was tough. There's a lot of learning, like a big learning curve. And a lot of it was like technical, like, Western blots and PCR and things like that. And I enjoyed like the technical aspect, but the actual, like, how do you design a research study? That was stuff that I never really learned until med school. And only towards the end of med school did I finally figure this out, which was you can take biostatistics in college, which I highly recommend, and you can actually design your own studies. And if you have, let's say, database access or access to some other kind of data, you can do preliminary data analyses and have essentially a drafted manuscript presented to your PI. And let's say it's an attending in plastic surgery that you're trying to impress for a letter of recommendation. And they're going to be like, oh, wait, you want me to be the PI on this paper that you already did all the work on? So I have very little work to do. Holy shit, you're a rock star. That's what I did with a few different PIs, and I got killer letters of recommendation. That's actually a tactic that I cover in the Ultimate Research course, because that is something that not only got me lots of papers very fast, but also got me really strong letters of recommendation that helped a lot for residency. So the Ultimate Research course you can find linked below. And when you're working hard to impress these people, whether it's through research or on your clinical rotations or whatever extracurricular you're in, let's say you're a pre-med, dude, people that work hard and have high integrity. I just did a video on the card channel, how to be top 5%. On the card channel, Jabal and Cars, I'll sometimes do these rambly bits where I just kind of like want to get something off my chest. And dude, like, it is shockingly easy to be in the top 5% these days. It is shockingly easy. You would show up on time, come early, leave late, work hard, do what you say what you're going to do, be honest, have integrity, right? Which is not just doing the right thing, but also, again, honoring your word and doing what you say and saying what you're going to do. And like, you're already in the top 5%. It is shockingly easy. You do that, you already stand out. I'm not even kidding. You already stand out. And you're going to get, that's how you actually get mentors. You don't go around asking people to be your mentors. You do the work, you add some value, and then the mentorship relationship occurs naturally. I'm always tired after long work days. How do you find motivation to do anything active? These days, right now on this trip, I'm not, because I haven't done a strength training workout in like 10 days, which is a record. I generally miss between 5 and 10 strength training days per year. And now I've missed 10 days. I guess I do 4 days per week. So I've missed 8 days so far, because I do 4 per week, and it's been 10 days total, but you know what I mean? I'm trying to remind myself that I need to take vacation and relax, and we're walking like 20,000 steps a day, so it's okay. But when I'm back home and you're coming back from work and you're tired after a long work day and you don't want to do anything active, what you have to remember is that, motivation doesn't have to precede action. You can actually take action and then motivation comes after the fact, which means to take the action in the first place, it sucks, but you have to overcome the activation energy. And you have to remind yourself that there are many days, many days, especially during work grinds when I'm sleeping less and I'm extra fatigued, where I do not want to go to the gym. I'm really not wanting to get a workout in. But you have to remind yourself, just put on the clothes, just get to the gym, and then you can come back home. Like you kind of lie to yourself, but you tell yourself that's all you have to do. You can go there, walk in the door, walk back out. But once you get inside, it's so much easier to then go to the piece of equipment. Another thing that's actually been helping me is I try to do both strength and cardio as I'm getting older. I think a lot of us guys, we tend to focus on strength when we're younger and then we neglect cardio. But cardio is obviously very important. Cardiovascular disease being the #1 killer of Americans. And I do a lot of zone 2 training and also do some interval training as well. So I actually have this Carol bike. I keep this at my girlfriend's place and I'll either do zone 2 workouts, like I'll do a meeting and they have this little expandable clip where you can put your phone. I actually put my iPad there and I'll do meetings. Or you put your iPad there, you watch TV, or you can use their tablet that's built in that I think has YouTube and like maybe Netflix. You can watch something there and do your intervals. And those shorter, more intense bursts of exercise paradoxically increase your energy because you're going to think, oh my God, I'm going to be exhausted. I'm already tired. That's going to make things worse. But you actually get an energy boost from doing that. And then it can also help you fall asleep earlier and sleep better that evening when you really push yourself, at least in my experience. And then at my place, I have a different bike. It's called a Wahoo Kicker Shift bike. They have a couple bikes. I got the cheaper one, so it doesn't do like tilt, but the same thing there. That one's a little bit more customizable in the size, and it's more focused for cyclists who want to replicate something as close to possible as their actual road bike. So I put like the same saddle from my road bike on my Wahoo, but I do the same thing. I actually use it's called Trainer Day. It's like Trainer Road, but a lot cheaper. It's like $4 a month rather than $20 a month. Does the same thing. Like you can have your zone 2 or your intervals or whatever workout you want to pull. It's all like, it's called erg mode. I'm probably getting too in the weeds right now, but essentially you just get on the bike and pedal and the resistance will automatically change for you, which is a nice convenient thing that allows you to focus on your meeting or your reading or your TV show or your podcast or whatever. By the way, if you are interested in the Carol bike, you can use my link below for a special discount. Miki AU. Can we get a new desk setup video? As for favorite productivity and organization tools, physical and digital, you got to do dual monitors. When I travel, just having one laptop definitely reduces the speed. Like if I want to do some coding on one side and, have the testing environment on the other, or, I'm messaging someone, looking at the website, and we're going back and forth. It is so much better to have dual monitors. I could do that with an iPad and you can do like Air display, something like that. But, when I'm traveling and my bag is filled with cameras and stuff like that, I don't want to bring an iPad as well. So at my desk, I like dual monitors. I have dual monitors at my place. I have dual monitors at my girlfriend's place. As for digital organization, I like Bartender for Mac. Just your top menu bar, like the icons on the right-hand side. It allows you to organize and customize the behavior there so that they're never shifting around unexpectedly. They're always in the same location. New icons can be placed in the same exact spot. It seems like such a small detail, but that consistency of always knowing where to click, that little second or two you save each time, it adds up and it reduces any hindrances from breaking your focus. Oh, there's a new one, Clean Shot X, which is for Mac. I don't think there's a similar app for Windows, but it allows you to take video capture, screen capture, etc., which Mac already allows you to do, but they have some like timers and a scrolling capture. So if you have a big page and you want to send a screenshot, rather than sending like 5 different screenshots as you scroll, screenshot, etc., which is what I used to do for the longest time, you can just do a single scrolling capture. That's probably my favorite feature there. And then in terms of like physical organization tools, other than the dual monitors, sit, stand, desk, because I'll notice back pain if I'm just sitting for too long. So then standing is awesome, but then standing, you get tired. So having the motorized controls helps. I used to be anti-motorized controls because I was concerned that with the motorized controls, I would just sit too often, because you want to incentivize the desired behavior, the tougher behavior, which is standing. So I used to have just a standing desk. If you guys look at my first ever, like when I was in residency, I did a studio tour or an office tour. and it was like a very cheap IKEA jerker desk that you can't, like it's like a 20-minute process to lower the actual desk. But now I just use the motorized ones, which IKEA has a really good one that's at a good price. That's what I have on my girlfriend's. If you are more budget conscious, there's also a walking pad desk bike that I'll sometimes use, where you have like a nice big tabletop and you can just set the resistance manually. There's no computer and speed and whatever. It's just a dial for resistance. You just pedal and you work on your laptop or you read your book or whatever. So stuff like that is what I gravitate towards and what I wish that I was using back in med school. And you can check out Walking Pad yourself with the link below. Luke Bowman, 9823. Is it worth taking a gap year to strengthen your application to go to an MD school, or should you just accept a DO acceptance? So big assumption here, which is that you take a gap year, you can get into MD, and if you don't take a gap year, you are pretty much set for a DO. So that is the big assumption of this question. Keep that in mind. With that being said, it is a very personal thing. I suggest for most students, they should try to go MD. However, and I've talked about those reasons elsewhere, quality of clinical rotations, cost of attendance, and overall loan burden and loan options, accreditation, options for specialties, because 3/4 of med students change their mind about specialties from the day they start to the day they graduate. So again, for most students, it is beneficial to go MD. And I know the whole PC thing is like, you got to say that they're both the same. They're not the same. Like once you're an attending physician, you can be a great DO and a great MD, or a bad DO and a bad MD. Like the degree doesn't mean you're a better or worse doctor. But in terms of pre-meds, choosing to go one or the other, MD is the better option. And I'm sick and tired of people lying to pre-meds and saying that they're both the same and that it doesn't matter, because that's just factually incorrect. If you watch our MD versus DO videos, you educate yourself about the pros and cons. You really want to save that extra year, because starting med school 1 year sooner means you earn an attending salary 1 year sooner. So I understand the value of going to med school one year sooner from a financial perspective. That makes sense. Then I think it's a fine option. But I just really want you to educate yourself and understand the pros and cons before you enter, because a lot of students don't, and it's really sad. Also, if you are super gung-ho about primary care, you may think, hey, I'm safe, I'm good. I was super gung-ho about pediatric gastroenterology for a very deeply personal reason, and yet getting into it, I was like, wow, I could never do pediatric gastroenterology. So keep in mind that you could change your mind, and just based on your specialty conviction, don't make your decision just based on that. Octavio Mehanjos, P10, what do you think about the curriculum taught in naturopathic medical school? I actually don't know much about naturopathic medical school. And I remember there was some like mixer of like health students or whatever. And there were a few naturopathic students there who were adamant that they were learning the same exact stuff as us. And this is like back when I was in med school. And I remember they were offering me a consult because I have my GI stuff. And I was really into like experimenting with diets and just trying to get everything under control. But it was too expensive. It was like $70 or something. And as a broke med student, I was like, yeah, no thanks. I don't know much about it. I do know a few things that are not based in evidence, and can't really say much more than that. Velvet 3813, what should I self-study after AP Biology and Anatomy and Physiology? I haven't studied Chem yet, so that is definitely next, but more health and cell related. So if you're doing AP Biology, I'm guessing that you're in high school, right? At this point, I don't know how much doing this self-study on your own is going to actually move the needle. Because think of it this way, you need to learn, let's say 1,000 units of information. I'm just making up a number just for sake of argument here. 1,000 units of information by the time you graduate med school. You're going to learn 700 of those units in med school alone. You're going to learn 200 of those units when you're in college and 100 in high school. I don't know, I'm just making up some ratios. So yes, those ratios are probably way off, but by you self-studying, you're going to get through 1.5 units, maybe less. And I think the more important skill here, rather than trying to learn those 1.5 out of 1,000 units, right, which is less than a single percent, that's 0.15%, is figuring out how to study better, especially in high school. So if you're doing active learning, spaced repetition with active recall, we have this video, Study Less, Study Smart, that goes, it's like a remake of my first ever video, goes through everything I learned about studying when I was finishing up med school, to be like, wow, I wish I knew this earlier, because college and med school would have been so much easier if someone had told me this. Watch that video. If you do those things, your life will be so much easier. And if you do those things, you will be able to learn in any of your classes a lot faster, and you'll then do better on your MCAT. You'll do better on your regular coursework, your exams and such. You'll do better on USMLE. You'll do better in med school. That's what you have to learn. It's the meta skill, right? Learning how to learn, rather than trying to get that extra 0.15% of additional knowledge now that you're going to have to learn later on anyway. Bibimbap 73. Why is anatomy so much harder than everything else? Any advice? Anatomy is harder for many students because unlike other topics that we're taught, it is concrete, physical, and three-dimensional. Whereas many other things we're taught are very simplified. Like even in physics, you're talking about projectile motion. It's like two axes of motion, right? You're not really looking three-dimensional space and understanding how things relate to one another. So it is a totally different beast, but if you want to become a doctor, it is necessary to learn. And I think it's actually very fascinating. Here in Italy, and I was in Milan, I went to the Leonardo da Vinci Museum there, and both him and Michelangelo very much studied human anatomy, and that's what allowed them to make such iconic pieces of artwork, whether that's sculpture or painting, and truly incredible stuff what they were doing. But I digress. I remember thinking in med school that the way anatomy was taught was very disjointed. Like there had to be a better way. It was extra messy, and good learning actually is a little bit messy, but it felt really just unnecessarily messy. And I downloaded those 3D anatomy apps. They were just coming out at the time, and those were cool and helpful, but sometimes there were issues, and it's not perfect. So for me, it was like YouTube videos, it was Anki decks, or just actual physical flashcards I had bought from Amazon. It was going to the cadaver lab, those 3D anatomy apps, and those things worked. But nowadays, there are tools like KenHub, which make the process a lot easier. So they consolidate everything into one platform, right? So you're going to learn from their custom-made videos, and then you immediately test yourself with quizzes to get that active learning. And then you can even make custom quizzes that you can share with your friends or classmates. Now, with their latest updates, they have this enhanced study tracking where you get a detailed progress report after each quiz, with visual indicators showing exactly where you stand on each topic. So then you no longer need to figure out what should I study next. It's actually going to tell you what your problem areas are. And now they've also added physiology content, so you can dive a little bit deeper into where everything is and how it's connected, because as we know, when you want to learn things most effectively, it's not just about learning what the thing is, but also its significance that helps it stick. You're building stronger interconnections in your brain. That's how these things stick, right? When it's not just knowing what a fact is, but its significance. So instead of juggling 5 different apps, like I had to, you get all this in just one nice, clean setup where anatomy and physiology are going to live in the same place. And you can use my custom link below for 10% off. Another one from Mickey: what are your thoughts on direct primary care? For those who don't know, direct primary care is essentially you circumvent insurance. You generally work with a doctor who has a smaller patient census, so they're working with way fewer patients, like maybe a quarter of the amount. And rather than billing insurance, you're directly paying for the services that they're rendering. So it tends to be a little bit more expensive, which is the main con. But the pro is that you tend to get, from my experience, more personalized care. Like you're not just on this conveyor belt, like in and out as quickly as possible. You can actually spend more time with your physician. And there's way easier availability because they don't have 2,000 patients. I actually have a few friends who are finishing up their family medicine residency, and they're both planning on doing DPC when they graduate. And I see why. There's pros and cons. It's not a perfect system. It's sad that we have to resort to that in the US because we're just country in the world and we still have all these access issues. But that might be a topic for a future video. Dr. Riz K: what are 3 tips for someone who's just starting his or her clinical rotations? All right, hold on, guys. My eyes are super itchy. The Italian pollen is messing with me, so I'm going to take my contacts out. So these are the 3 tips that come to mind. They may not be the best tips. These are just the first that come up. So number 1, the vibes, like be positive, be happy. Don't be a Debbie Downer. Don't be cynical. No one wants to work with that person. It's not cool. It's not pleasant, and just don't do it. Number 2 is come early, leave late. That's going to make a positive impression, and it's just an easy way to stand out, honestly. And number 3, don't be annoying. So remember that you're there to learn and to help out where you can. We all have spotlight syndrome, so we think that we're the center of the universe because that is our experience, but don't constantly be asking the resident, like, hey, what can I help with? Hey, what can I help with? Hey, like anything else you need me to do because you want to go home? Like that's what you say when you want to go home. Hey, is there anything else I can help with? And it's fine to do those things. Just be mindful and don't pester people. So if you can see what's happening on the surface, try to anticipate what's going to come next and then be helpful with that. Like, go get the bandages ready for the rooms if you're going to be pre-rounding. So go ahead and get the bandage bag restocked and ready for rounding, right? Come a little bit early, make sure you do that each day so that when you need to change the wound dressings, you already have the bag there for your residents. Wow, Dr. Riz K, you're doing an awesome job. Thanks for having this ready. Those little things really move the needle. Nick So-O, advice for pre-med starting in community college and taking a non-traditional degree. Remember that med schools are going to want to see your coursework, your medical school prerequisites from a 4-year institution. So what you need to do is transfer over from community college to a 4-year institution and do more of your coursework there. The reason being, getting A's in all your pre-med prereqs out of community college is a very different ordeal than getting A's at a 4-year institution. David Twig, C5J, is getting a bachelor's of science in nursing a good undergrad for becoming a doctor? It's not a common one, and it's not a really strong one necessarily. When it comes to your pre-med prereqs, a lot of the prereqs there are going to overlap a little bit, but they're going to truncate things like the more advanced biology or organic chemistry, things like that. They're going to be more clinical experience focused, less research focused. There's also going to be a lot of time on clinical experience. So then the other extracurriculars that you want to be doing as a pre-med are going to suffer. So generally speaking, we don't advise students to do a nursing degree. Also, when you apply to med school, the med school admissions committees are rightfully going to ask, like, wait, if you did nursing, you probably want to be a nurse. Like, why are you applying to med school? Like, why don't you just go do nursing? So there's just an extra hurdle that you have to jump through. Steve Austin, 2711. It's getting late and that whiskey's not doing me any favors. Can doing an intense surgical specialty like neurosurgery, cardiothoracic surgery, etc., in an academic setting be considered a good work-life balance, since you can do research, more flexibility, and have less of a clinical commitment? So it's not just a matter of like academia versus community versus private practice, which is what we talk about and So You Want to Be. Academia, you actually work pretty hard because it's not just the surgery, but you're doing more administrative stuff as well. You're doing some teaching, right? You're doing some research, you're doing some surgery. Yeah, I wouldn't actually say academia is the move if you want to prioritize lifestyle. That being said, you can find, it's a spectrum, right? So you can find jobs in any given specialty that are going to be harder or less hard, but on average, it's going to be much harder to find a neurosurgery or cardiothoracic surgery job opening that will give you as much flexibility, guaranteed days off on certain holidays, things like that, and just total number of hours worked versus some other non-surgical specialties or some surgical specialties like plastics that aren't quite as unpredictable with call, unless you do microsurgery with plastics, which can have very unpredictable call. Yayada Papaya 9740. Do plastic surgeons still get to do facial procedures such as nerve transfer for Bell's palsy, for example, or has ENT taken that domain entirely? It's going to depend on the institution because there is this tug of war, right? So I actually remember there was a facial reanimation, right? A nerve transfer for Bell's palsy that I was scrubbed in on late 20-teens. So historically, a lot of these more complex reconstructions and nerve transfers, things like that, have been more plastic surgery because they're the ones who are innovating a lot of these different techniques. But many of them have now been adopted for the surgical specialists in that area of the body, such as ENT is going to do that more in the head and neck region. So depends on the institution. And when it comes to these turf wars, it is really just institution dependent. And it's hard to say what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years, because if you're considering plastics now, you're not going to be an attending plastic surgeon until at least 6+ years, right? So things can change by then. But don't forget that there are also many collaborative procedures, like very complex reconstructions, where you're going to have a plastic surgeon working with a neurosurgeon, for example, depending on what the case is. So the reason I say that is one of the first cases, actually the first case I did ever see in the OR was a animated latissimus dorsi transfer. So this patient was not able to bend her arms at the elbows, and as you can imagine, that's disastrous for your activities of daily living, like how do you brush your teeth, how do you eat, stuff like that. So the plastic surgeon and neurosurgeon worked together to transfer the latissimus dorsi. Both are attached up here. They remove the origin around the spine, right? And they left the insertion in place. flipped it around here, tunneled it under the skin, left the nerve innervation and the blood supply intact, put it under the skin, and then, we're able to create a bicep. And I remember patient was laying on the table and they were stimulating the nerve to make sure that the positioning and the tension on the muscle was just right so that it would actually bend, because if it's too tight, then she can't actually straighten out the arm. If it's too loose, then you're not gonna be able to bend the arm fully. Super cool, straight up sci-fi. That was the reason that I wanted to pursue plastics. That was the first case I saw, and I remember calling my mom, walking to the car, saying, "Hey mom, I'm gonna be a plastic surgeon. This stuff is so cool. It's straight up science fiction. I cannot believe that we are doing this in this day and age." Albuen, what drew you to hand surgery, and do you think there's any advantage to specializing in hand surgery through a plastic surgery pathway rather than the more traditional orthopedic route? The truth is I love both specialties and I'm drawn to the intricacy behind hand surgery, but I have no idea which route to go. I'd love your opinion on that. This is a great question. I really like this. So I liked hand surgery because of the intricacy, the detail, the complexity. There's so much going on in the hands. It's wild because even in anatomy, your regular anatomy classes, you don't go quite as in depth as what you'll be doing on your plastic surgery rotations. And it's truly incredible stuff, especially when you're doing things like reimplantations and stuff. Truly incredible what the hands and feet are, right? The complexity and intricacy. So that's why I liked hand surgery and microsurgery. But microsurgery, the lifestyle, I knew that I wouldn't appreciate that long term. One thing I did not like about hand surgery, which I guess is actually not a big deal, but you tend to sit in hand surgery. And I found that when I sat a lot, at least back at the time before I had figured out all of my body mechanic stuff, is I would get back pain from sitting for too long. So I actually liked other types of plastic surgery where you would be standing. But then if you're the attending surgeon, you can choose to have the table higher to stand. You don't have to sit. So not a big deal. Now, great question you ask about plastics versus ortho. They're both going to give you that intricacy, that delicateness of the anatomy. But with plastics, you're going to be a little bit more soft tissue focused. And with orthopedic surgery, you're going to be a little bit more bony focused, as expected. What I would also suggest that you consider is, outside of just the bony versus soft tissue focus, the rest of the specialty, which one appeals to you more? Because you're going to be doing that for 5 years for ortho and 6 years for plastics and residency. And you may actually change your mind about the fellowship you want to do. We change our minds all the time about these things. So choosing the specialty where you see a greater interest in the other things you could also opt to do is just a way to reduce your risk of being unhappy with your ultimate career path. 211 Dan, as a plastic surgeon with an MD, so I'm not a plastic surgeon, I was a plastic surgery resident physician, right? So surgeon in training. So what tips do you have for DOs wanting to go into the competitive fields? It's the same fundamentals. So really strong letters of recommendation from plastic surgeons, right? So your DO program should hopefully give you access to that. If not, you need to seek that out. Having a lot of research. I mean, there is, I think the average number of research items for plastics is now 34. 2 to 4 years ago, it was 20. Neurosurgery is at 37. Derm is 25, 27, something like that. It's really high. So research is a huge one. That's a really easy way to stand out too. And whether you're a pre-med or a med student, the nice thing about it is that if you do research as a pre-med, it is the one thing you can do as a pre-med that will help you even get into residency, because everything else you do as a pre-med only helps you get into med school. Residencies don't care that I was on the dance team in college, right? That doesn't help my odds. But any research I did is still on my CV and it still adds to my total research item count. So our ultimate research course goes over how to do that, how to do everything, including all the advanced tactics that I talked about earlier in this AMA. I had 65 research items. So it was something that programs love to talk about, because if you are prolific with research, it means that they're going to get more grant funding. They get more money, right? So they're more likely to want you to join their program. Yeah, so of course, super strong board scores, crush USMLE, apply super broadly, have a really killer application and make those connections with plastic surgeons, crush your away rotations, right? It's the same stuff that MD students have to do. You just got to turn it up a notch because you are working a bit uphill with the DOs. And that's why I generally advise students to try to go MD when possible. But if you are a DO, it's not game over at all. It's not impossible. It is totally doable. You just gotta work for it. There's a cool tool that I'm very excited about. It's at residencypredictor.com. So you can actually look at your odds of matching into a given specialty, and it leverages the most recent official NRMP data. So you'll put in your own like what school you go to, because it'll look at whether you're top 40 NIH or not, and that actually gets factored into your odds. It'll look at your STEP scores or your MCAT score, which will then convert to the equivalent STEP score based on MCAT percentiles of matriculants, not of all MCAT test takers, but matriculants, very important distinction, and various other factors. So that can actually tell you what your odds are for matching into a competitive specialty. I don't have the data yet for DOs. I am working on adding that when I get back from my trip, but you can use that right now for pre-meds and med students who are at MD programs, and it'll give you a very detailed analysis about where you stand and your possible areas for improvement. Muhammad Nabil 1150, during my internship year, I struggled to choose my specialty despite knowing the pros and cons of each specialty. It seems difficult to mentally handle all the variables to choose what suits me well. This actually reminds me of an earlier question. I mean, I'm also type A, like we love certainty, we love clear-cut answers, right and wrong. But when it comes to choosing a specialty, it is a fuzzy around the edges kind of process. And you have to do the best with what information you have and how you know yourself and, looking at the world around you. And AI is coming. I probably would not choose specialties that are at higher risk of being impacted by AI. Things like dermatology, pathology, radiology, primary care. Those are probably the highest risk. I would probably do something that is lower risk. Things that are procedural are going to be lower risk, as an example. Get more exposure, as much exposure as you can before you have to make that decision. Seek out people in those fields who are ahead of you, either by a couple of years or by several years, who are like attendings, and talk to them. What do they like and not like about it? You're going to learn things about the specialty that you hadn't considered before. And if you're anything like me and you like some structure and organization and data to guide the process, then consider creating a spreadsheet where you can rank how important each of those variables are to you. You should actually check out our specialtyquiz.com. So I don't think that's going to answer all your questions. It's a good starting point, but obviously we can't factor in how important lifestyle versus procedures are to a given person. But we look at 9 different factors, but you may weigh those factors differently and they're not going to all be equal for you, right? So it's a good starting point. Go through the quiz, see what what insights it can provide, but look at those 9 factors that we have and maybe start there, create a spreadsheet for yourself with those 9 factors and how important is each of those 9 factors to you. And then think about all the specialties that you're considering and then rank them across those 9 factors and then make an equation. And then you can see which specialties you should be considering at the top of your list. And then you can narrow down and seek out more experiences there to see between those 2 or 3 finalists, which one is best suited for you. Sado9961, as is often the case with this medical life, I'm struggling with deciding which of so many paths to take and who to become in the future, what specialty to choose, where to work, whether I should prioritize living these precious years fully or dedicate myself to work. Where should I start? Yeah, uncertainty is a common theme on this one, on this AMA. So the specialty, again, specialtyquiz.com. So you want to be day in the life. So you want to be is a playlist on Med School Insiders. Day in the life is a playlist on this channel. These are good starting points to get you thinking about various factors about which specialty you want to choose. Where to work, don't worry about that right now. First focus on the specialty. Once you finish that, then you can focus on where you want to work, because you don't need to decide where you're going to work and then backtrack from there about your specialty. You can decide where to work after the specialty. Should you prioritize living these precious years fully or dedicate yourself to work? So you either live up your 20s and then you become an underskilled 30-year-old, or you work really hard in your 20s and you become an underlived 30-year-old, and then you have to decide for yourself which one do you prioritize. And I like to think that there's a way to thread the needle. There's always going to be a trade-off. I like to live, like my personal philosophy is living with high intensity. So that's a theme that comes across in so many domains of my life. But the way it applies here is you work really, really hard for a longer period of time, and then you very intentionally and very intensely pursue some kind of relief, or after step 1, I went on a budget cruise through the British Virgin Islands, which was a lot of fun, and really just like leaned into that experience and had some wild adventures and some lifelong memories I'm going to cherish, right? So working really hard and then having these small bursts is something that I'm happy with. At the end of med school, went to Bali for a couple of weeks with my med school classmates. And that's the kind of thing that I am okay with. But for other people, their happy medium is going to be different. So you have to decide that for yourself. I personally lean more towards working harder in your 20s because you're never going to have this level of energy and this lack of commitment again in your life. And what you do now can set you up for decades in the future. So there's this compounding effect to the hard work you do now, to the skills you build, to the foundation you set for yourself. So I think if you're just like trying to logically break it down, I think more often than not, it makes sense to really work hard in your 20s, but there's a case to be made to live it up in your 20s. Corin Moskovic 4681. What do you think about the upcoming specialty of space medicine? And what are your thoughts on the future? Dude, that's a really good question. I haven't actually thought of that. So Johnny Ken, you guys may know him, the Navy SEAL doctor astronaut guy that makes every fellow Asian student feel like a failure, right? You've seen the memes. Yeah, I haven't chatted with him in years, but he'd probably be a good person to talk to about that, honestly. I think he's at NASA now. Let me see what we can do. I actually don't have much to say about it right now because I haven't done much research on it at all. So maybe we'll do a So You Want to Be episode in the future, and stay tuned for that. Thanks for the idea. Orange Blossom 1712. Do you miss working in the hospital? Honestly, not really. I mean, most days I am so grateful. The number of days, like the percentage of days now is less than before. But I used to have to like pinch myself for the first 1 or 2 years, being like, wait, I don't have to be anywhere. I can wake up whenever I want, be wherever I want. This is wild. Like, this feels wrong. Like it felt wrong for the longest time because I was so used to that. I miss working with my hands, and I miss the operating room, and there's this honor and this like privilege of working with patients through their toughest times. And that's something that is very special as a physician. But, when I was advising students as well, like sometimes it's not a doctor-patient relationship, but sometimes you are really working through very sensitive and very difficult stuff too. I don't take on many students now anymore. I'm now focused more on running the business, growing the business. I'll take on just a couple students per year, and that's on a per application basis. I try to keep it as an infrequent thing because I think that's the right thing for me to be doing right now in this stage of the company. But I mean, the biggest thing, if I'm being honest, is really just like working with my hands and the like artistry and precision and meticulousness that plastic surgery provided. I think that was the part that really just resonated a lot. And I think making an impact with patients, I have in a different way with pre-meds and med students. And it's still very profoundly, but not quite the same way. But the actual hospital itself, like, I'm okay not working in a hospital. Well, let's know more about the meals you're eating in a day and a week, and also your cooking processes. I have similar genetic profile like yours in regards to metabolic health and diabetes risk, so I'm very curious. This was a question on my DNA says diabetes, can I beat my genetics video? Which is essentially, we have different genetics, right? And different predispositions to what we can and cannot eat and get away with. I'm running my CGM here in Italy, and I was so excited because everyone was telling me that because the gluten here doesn't have glyphosates and it's made differently and higher quality and yada yada, you're not going to spike as much and you're going to lose weight. Not my experience at all. So let me tell you what's been happening. I've been spiking very hard, and I've definitely gained some weight. I'm not strength training, and I'm eating very unrestrained right now because when I'm traveling, I want to have rich food experiences. So what I'm noticing is that, number one, I think people, when they travel from America to Europe and when they lose weight despite not trying, I think it's because they are walking a lot more here and they're far more sedentary at home. They probably don't work out as much. I'm kind of the reverse right now because normally at home I cycle 5-6 times a week and I strength train 4 times a week. So here I'm not doing that. I've cycled like 3 times and I've done strength training once on this whole trip, and I'm like day 10 right now. And then also I'm guessing those people probably don't eat as clean consistently at home, and then when they're traveling here and they're eating higher quality food, that is either a sidestep or an upgrade for them, right? And for me, to answer your question, what I normally eat at home, because I feel like I have really terrible genetics, every single member in my immediate family is either pre-diabetic or diabetic, despite not being obese. Like, they're either normal weight or in the overweight category. That is adjusted for Asians. So if you are South or East Asian, the BMI scale shifts, meaning that at a given weight and height, what can make you normal weight for a Caucasian can make you overweight for an Asian, and what can make you overweight for a Caucasian can make you obese for an Asian, because that's related to the amount of visceral body fat you have, which is the fat around your organs. That is the more important thing we care about rather than subcutaneous fat. The fat underneath your skin is not as important when it comes to your overall health. But the fat inside your gut, around your organs, that is very important. So Asians tend to accumulate more visceral body fat at a lower body weight, hence the shifting of the BMI. When I'm at home, I eat a lot of chicken, sometimes fish, and a lot of veggies. So it's usually like when I cook for myself at home, generally chicken, super quick, yogurt, avocado oil, lemon, garlic, ginger, cumin, MSG, salt, mix that up, throw it in the air fryer, boom. And then I either have a salad or I'll have some cooked veggies, which I also air fry. Asparagus, broccolini, carrots, things like that. Carrots will make me spike though because of the sugar content. Jacob DHD, what is the most unique business ventures that a med student or doctor you know went on to do? Dude, I had a co-resident in plastics who quit, I think PGY 3 because they had a patent for like a camera system, like something about like an autofocus ring, a patent, and then they sold it to, I think, Leica. I thought that was like, wow. So wait, hold on. How did that happen? Super cool story. Yeah, there's actually quite a few in my network. One of my buddies just started his own like DPC concierge practice, which is not like a very unique business venture, but he's kind of like me in that he's very interested in health and he follows Peter Attia quite closely. Peter Attia has a really cool story too. Like he quit either during or after his third year of general surgery residency. Common misconception, people think that he was a surgical oncologist. He never even did surgical oncology fellowship. And then he did McKinsey for like 2 years and then started his own concierge practice. And I think what he's doing is very cool, like really cutting edge, really challenging the way things are done and thinking in first principles. We're actually getting a lot of the people in my network who have these non-traditional paths within medicine, whether it's quitting medicine completely, still being in medicine and having a side hustle, or transitioning to something else within medicine, like doing these private practices, concierge practices, things like that. And we're featuring these speakers in the Unhappy Doctor Solution course. So if you want to check that out, there's a link below. And I'm very excited because I think this course is going to be adding a ton of value to med students and residents and attending physicians who are trying to get more from their profession, whether that's inside or outside of medicine. We have something for everyone. Very excited about the process and the community that we're building there. So check out the link below if you're interested. Dina Gull, you have accomplished incredible things so far in your life. What is something that you would really like to accomplish but haven't yet? I appreciate that, Dina. I feel like I haven't accomplished that much, honestly. I guess it's all relative, right? This is such a good question, Dina, and I hope I can do it justice. I may have to think about it more and come back to it later. But right now, I would say that what's been front and center for me this year is just understanding how much more I want to improve as an entrepreneur. So Med School Insiders grew insanely quick at the beginning, so fast that like we sold out a lot and then we had to keep refunding customers because we were growing at such a pace that, we wanted to keep the quality of our services high. We were growing the operations, the infrastructure to serve clients at a reasonable pace, but our demand just like skyrocketed. And at that time I was like, yo, business is easy. And then now as I'm educating myself more, I'm like, oh wow, there's so many levels to this. And just already learning things and shining lights on blind spots that I've had as an entrepreneur earlier this year and learning more about marketing. So, dude, there's actually I do these calls with some of our customers after the application. You just like see how things went and talk things through and see what we can learn and improve and what they liked and didn't like. What can we double down on? What can we change? And, just set them up for success in the next phase of their training. So there was a student who we helped get into med school this year, which we're super excited about. And he actually worked with one of our top competitors like a couple years ago, maybe a year or two ago, the prior application cycle. And I guess we all have different strengths and weaknesses as entrepreneurs. One thing that I've realized this year is like, wow, my marketing is actually not very good because apart from doing social media, our marketing has a lot of room for improvement. So the student actually worked with one of our top competitors and said that their product was so much worse in all these different ways. They said that their coach or their advisor at this company gave them the most generic nonsense advice, like follow your heart and do what feels good. Stuff that he could have just found for free online, not stuff that was actually insightful. It was fragmented because they had multiple, like a writer advisor and then a doctor advisor. And they didn't like the experience because it was like constant delays and one person playing telephone game with the other advisor saying, hey, I'll get back to you, but I need to check with the other person first. And he ended up having to submit the application before he was ready because he just kept getting delayed by this back and forth. And like we have designed, like we spent so much time making sure our product was very strong at the very beginning. Like we spent a lot of time and energy with various people to just like pressure test it and make sure it was the best possible product before we launched. I guess like it's easy to forget that because you build a system at the beginning and then you just run the system afterwards and you make some improvements along the way. But what it makes me realize is, wow, our marketing needs a lot of effort and like a lot of revamping. So the game of entrepreneurship is very exciting because you're constantly learning, you're constantly shining that light on your blind spots. So that's one thing that I'm excited to work on over the next year or two, is getting our marketing to be at the same level as the quality of our products. So we've already done that with Casper AI. We've put a lot of effort into marketing it better. And our Casper AI product is now very solid. We're very happy with it. And now we have a good branding machine around it to make sure that it gets into the hands of people that need it. And it's exciting, when people say, hey, we got top quartile, like super hyped about it. That's a good feeling. And then if I'm being honest on a personal level, the biggest thing that like, I'm still not over, man. Still not over is like I have these fitness goals, and like I feel that with most things in life, I try hard and I work hard towards them and I make the progress that I think is either commensurate with my efforts or, is reasonably like there. It's like fitness. It's always fitness. I feel like I put in so much time and energy. I've tried a lot to make sure that my fitness is optimized. I worked with professional coaches for 4 or 5 years. Right now I'm not working with a coach, but for the last 4 or 5 years I did, and optimize my diet, track my macros, and like, make sure my routine was optimized and getting sure my sleep is above 7 hours a night, all those things, and just like still not able to hit my fitness goals. I'm not giving up though, still working on it. Actually, maybe I'll talk more about my stuff I've done to optimize my testosterone. So I was actually around 850 to 1,000 for a few years. And then I recently dipped to like 650 for like a 12-month period. I was like, oh, that's a bit lower. Maybe that's, hurting my my gains, even though 650 is like totally within the normal range for my age. So I got on clomiphene, which is a selective estrogen receptor modulator, which essentially just tells your pituitary like, hey, we need more testosterone. So then you then produce more testosterone. And then I got my testosterone up to like 1,100 for the last 3 months. I was working out really hard and still didn't really see the level of gains and returns that I was hoping to. So again, we're going to keep troubleshooting and figure out what's going on. I think that it's largely I hate to pull this card because I think that it's like I'm not trying to play the victim part at all. I think it's just genetic, and I think that I have to just accept that. I'm not going to be able to hit a lot of the fitness goals that I want to because there's a bell curve when it comes to your fitness and your response to stimulus, when it comes to hypertrophy, or when it comes to even cardiovascular gains. And I think that I am not at the very like worst end, but I'm definitely on that half. And I believe that with a very high degree of certainty. But I mean, that doesn't really change anything because I'm still going to, regardless, I'm going to keep working out. There's so many benefits to it. I'm going to keep trying my best. I'm going to keep troubleshooting, and like, I'm not going to give up. You know what I mean? So, all right, we got a lot of questions about AI. Nerdy Novelist 5373. I'm scared that mid-levels with AI will take over primary care. On the one hand, there's a great demand for it, so I get it. But on the other hand, as someone that soaped into FM, I'm scared for my ability to pay off student loans or live comfortably in the context of rising inflation, especially since I went to an expensive DO school. And then we got Molasses Boy 1186. Are you integrating AI into any of your business ventures right now? Kyler 976. What are your thoughts on the Sheriff of Sodium's recent video on AI in medicine? Dude, AI, so fascinating. So I was just reflecting on this here in Italy, which is that the Renaissance, right, started here in Florence. And it was from like the 1300s to the 1600s. And we look back at that as the Enlightenment, the time that, the way that we viewed humans and approached science and thought was unlike anything before. And so much progress was made. I'm so curious to see what we think about this time in the world. The computer, the PC, the mid to late 1900s, AI, the early 2000s, and like how things are so rapidly changing right now. Will humans of the future go back to certain cities the way that we do with the Renaissance and say like, oh wow, this is where whatever company and whatever thing was done in the tech world, that shaped the future forever in this really crazy way. And I think AI is going to make massive waves in medicine. I think a lot of my colleagues in medicine, even those who specialize in like AI research within their respective field, are a lot more optimistic about humans still having a really long time ahead of them, like a long road ahead in terms of working without influence from AI changing supply and demand. But I've noticed a few patterns. So the Sheriff of Sodium video, I thought it was really well done. When we started talking about business stuff, I had a few things that I would have added. I think he was talking about like the business use case of like AI in medicine and things like that. But he really addressed a few of the issues that I've seen brought up so many times by people, which is like, hey, being a doctor is so much more complicated than being a fast food worker or this other job. Like, they're going to replace those things first. And it's like, well, it's not just the complexity, it's also the payoff, right? So you have to think about incentives. As Charlie Munger once said, you show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. So meaning if there's a strong incentive to work on AI in medicine, there's a big payout for doing so. The venture capitalists want to multiply their investment many times over. You do that in something like medicine, which is a massive industry in the US. So if a company can use AI to replace doctors or to make them far less necessary and multiply the efforts of one doctor to then say, hey, you don't need, hey, hospital, you don't need 50 doctors anymore. Now you can get away with just 5. Right? That is completely going to transform supply and demand economics, and the salaries of those 5 physicians can be way harder to get a job. And the payoff for that AI company who's now replacing, they can charge so much money for that service because the hospital is now not having to pay 45 salaries. They're going to be able to, even if they're paying, $5 million a year, they're still saving so much money by not having to pay for 45 attending salaries plus benefits, et cetera, and all the complexity of the personnel management, HR, yada, yada. So I think a lot of people miss that. Well, that was a well-done video. I think Sheriff of Sodium and I are in alignment about what specialties are more likely to be replaced. Things like primary care and also the pattern recognition heavy specialties like derm, rads, path. Primary care, like already, I think a lot of these chatbots can do 80 to 90% plus of what primary care doctors are doing. And it's not, again, like people think about black and white. It's not 0 to 100. It's like you start with just a little bit of change, a little bit of regulatory approval. Things change where doctors are now becoming more effective. It's helping doctors, yay, but now starting to reduce the amount of work that they need to do. Doctors are now only focusing on the complex cases. The AI is now handling the simpler cases. Like it's a multi-year process, and this isn't happening next year or the year after that. It's several years down the road, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. You're going to start noticing AI having significant influence in something like healthcare and medicine. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't pursue those specialties, but if you are on the fence, if you are undecided on certain specialties, then I would say things like procedural specialties, surgical specialties, those are going to be lower risk. I think that just AI itself is going to shift primary care in massive ways. Mid-levels are, a lot cheaper than doctors, but still way more expensive than just using an AI. And again, you're not going from 0% AI to 100% replacing all doctors. You're going from 0% to 20% where now they're augmenting to eventually, the point where the AI handles most of the simple cases and the doctor and mid-level are only handling the more complex cases. So, and then there are ramifications of that because then you don't need as many doctors, supply and demand, etc. Now, as for how I'm integrating AI into any of my business ventures, so with Med School Insiders, we have 3 separate AI products right now. The first is Casper AI. This is for the pre-meds who are applying to med school. They want to take the Casper test. This is the hands down best way to study for Casper. You get the tool and then the video course and community. So the tool is AI-based. You have videos, you have text-based scenarios as well. And then when you answer, you can either type or you do a video response. It'll grade both of those, very extensive feedback. It'll coach you so that you can get a top quartile score. That's our goal, right? And then we also have a community and video series where I actually walk you through the Casper, like the strategy, explain all that stuff. People have been very happy with that. It's actually really been taken off recently. Excited about that. The second product is the Preview AI course, which is for, again, pre-meds who are applying to med school. It is the AAMC preview exam. Same thing. It's another AI tool that's going to help you maximize your score there. This is a multiple choice test though, so it's a bit simpler. It's a bit quicker to use and quicker to study for compared to Casper. And then the third one, this is the most complex one, but is really exciting, is Interview AI. You're having a conversation with this AI bot. It is very convincing. It will exhibit emotions and display those emotions when it's talking to you. And it will also grade you on your responses. It has a massive question bank, super cool thing. And again, we have the AI tool and then the video course plus community access that you can add on as well. That one is the most robust and advanced AI tool that we have. And it's actually made by this team, these really brilliant guys. I'm advising and investing in their company. And they actually went through Y Combinator, like the world's #1 accelerator program, out in San Francisco. So really sharp guys. They've created an incredible product, and we're leveraging their very advanced technology for Interview AI. And we are very proud with what we have to offer. So check it out at interview.medschoolinsiders.com. If you're interested, for Casper, it is casper.medschoolinsiders.com, and preview is preview.medschoolinsiders.com. You can find all of those linked below. How much does the fact that DO schools have opened many more med school spots than MD schools play a role in acceptance statistics, especially in the last few years? Well, remember that after they open a school, it still takes 4 years for people to graduate. So if you look at the number of DO students, it has been increasing. But I think I don't know off the top of my head, but I think the match rate has been relatively consistent. I think it's only fluctuated by a small amount, if I recall correctly. That's a good point you bring up, though. I would love to take a closer look at that data. And then we keep doing these updates on like match data when it comes out every year. So I'll make a point to look more closely at that in our next updated video. So thank you for that. OSOSXD, is med school in Romania, Russia, Poland, and Eastern Europe at the same level of quality as med school in Germany, Sweden, or the USA? You did make a video criticizing Caribbean medical schools. What about the European ones? They're super easy to get into. You basically need passing grades, not high grades. So I actually can't speak to the quality of European medical schools. I will say that if you want to practice in the USA, right? So most people do. A lot of people, even not in the USA, want to practice in the US because doctors here make the most worldwide. So doing med school in the US is going to make that process a lot easier, because to practice in the US, you need to have attended a US residency. Now, there are some policies that are rolling out that are allowing IMGs to come in an easier way, IMGs and FMGs, but that's still a lot harder and, many fewer spots than if you just go to US med school and then apply to a US residency and do that standard route. I think a lot of people get so focused as pre-meds on the next step, and the next step is getting into med school. And they say, well, it's easier here versus there. Let me just go here instead. But they don't think about the next step after that. The next step after that, which is necessary to become a attending physician, is getting into residency. And getting into residency in the US as a US MD student or US DO student is a lot easier than coming in as an IMG. So keep that in mind. Cillian, hi Dr. Jabal, I'm trying to become more disciplined in how I spend my time and improve my ability to work hard consistently like you can. Do you have any advice? Thank you. Looking forward to learning more from another Q&A. I found them valuable. Thank you, Cillian. I appreciate you watching. Very nice comment of yours. So I've fluctuated with this over time. I've had seasons. I noticed in high school, I was able to really just grind hard on chemistry or math problems. I'd turn on music and just focus on it. I didn't have a smartphone at the time, right? This is maybe the iPhone had just come out, but I didn't have an iPhone for the first few years after it came out, right? So it was so much easier to focus when you didn't have distractions. And then there was a period of time where I was getting more distracted. And a few things have helped. Number one is I like instrumental music. I have my own study playlist. We used to include it on our Med School Insiders newsletter. Maybe we'll bring it back. But it was Kevin Jubal study playlist on Apple Music and on Spotify. And it's a lot of instrumental, deep house, and melodic stuff that helps me focus. So that's number one. Number two is not getting distracted by your phone, which oftentimes for me nowadays means putting it on the charger a few feet away or in a completely different room. And then the other two things I want to say is pay attention to your energy state as it fluctuates throughout the day. So this took me years to figure out for myself, but I get my best work done in the morning, the hardest, most difficult to mentally taxing work in the morning. Afternoons, I have a bit of a slump, and then evenings, I get a lot of creative energy. So I change my task list and what I want to do at different parts of the day based on that. Actually, I'm going to give you two more, not just one more. Related to that, number one, don't make yourself wrong for working hard. I'm not going to be working 80-hour weeks for the rest of my life. But there have been weeks this year where I'm working 80 or 90 hours. And that's okay. Like, it's not going to last forever, but sometimes I'm working on something really hard. I'm very excited about it. Like a lot of these tools, residencypredictor.com, specialtyquiz.com, and specialtyrank.com are 3 tools that I've created this year myself. I was just excited to, and I put in really long hours, 2 a.m., whatever. It was just fun. It was exciting, right? So don't make yourself wrong for putting in long hours. It's not going to last for the rest of your life. Like this whole like should versus shouldn't, you know, I used to make myself wrong for not being as balanced. And that's kind of silly. Like, why should I have to adhere to someone else's rules or suggestions on how to live my life? It is my life, right? And then the final thing that's been very helpful is if you focus on the hard thing every day, just like that one task you want to get done, and it doesn't have to be the first thing you do in the day. For me, sometimes it's like late afternoon, early evening, really just focusing on that thing and just having that momentum, it carries me for the rest of the week. Like the next day, I'm super excited and energized to tackle the next thing and the next thing. And like the snowball just builds. So keep at it. It's like a muscle. So it'll get easier with time. And this year I've been working pretty nutty hours, but it's felt easier than normal because of these principles. Curly Girl Bree 6233. I'm struggling with time management, trying to balance my current schedule and finding time to study efficiently. Best advice you can give me. Time blocking. So that's like where you are very distinct and clear about how you are spending each 15 or 30-minute hour segment in your day. Use a calendar app for that. Do an audit of where your time is being spent throughout the day. So we all waste so much time that we don't even realize. And after doing an audit, maybe you'll see that, you know, you spend an hour watching Netflix every day. You can probably trim that down to 15 minutes. Like for me, when I was in high school, college, I had a rule for myself, which was that I could only watch TV if I was eating or stretching. And if I stopped doing either, then I had to stop the show or the movie. So sometimes it would take me like 4 sittings to finish a movie, which I don't do that anymore. But during those seasons of my life, it was helpful. And if you're just being more intentional and more aware of how you are spending each moment of your day, then you can be intentional about when you want to waste it or like relax and when you want to just get shit done. And that's like a sliding scale. So there are certain days or certain weeks or certain months or seasons in your life where you want to get shit done and not watch a minute past your eating/stretching window. And there are other seasons in your life where like, you know what, I'm going to watch the full movie and not feel guilty about it. And that's okay. You just want to be intentional about it. King623, been trying to optimize my sleep lately. Do those cooling mattresses actually work? Are they worth the cost? Dude, my A-Sleep mattress is pretty fire. My girlfriend loves it because I set the AC cool and then she's always too cold, so then she warms up her bed. I still feel too hot at the beginning of the night, so I cool mine down. But then you need to like change the curve, which it already automatically does, but you can't just cool your mattress. You need the mattress to then warm up later in the night because otherwise you'll wake up too cold. You know what I mean? So I think what they've created is a very impressive product. I actually have tried a competitor's product, which I thought was going to be similar, but was much lower quality and doesn't have the same advanced tech and sleep tracking and temperature curves and all that stuff that the A-Sleep does. So I've been very happy with it. While traveling, we've occasionally had some issues with the temperature. So, you know, I wish I had my A-Sleep at these hotels, but that's not realistic. At home, I sleep really well. I have a Tempur-Pedic mattress. I love that. A-Sleep works really well. I got the Pod 5. The Pod 5, you can have just the bed cover, you can have the cooling blanket, and you can have the motorized base. I have only the bed cover, not the blanket and not the motorized base. That version alone is adding a lot of value for me. I'm happy with it. If you do want to try it out, then check out my link below for a special discount. Allison Campbell 123. I need to know how to manage stress and not feel overwhelmed by everything I need to do. Okay, that reminds me of something. Quick little sidetrack here. I recently heard about a student who was feeling very anxious about their upcoming MCAT because they took the MCAT once and they have a lot of test anxiety. So their practice test was high, their actual test was low, and they need to get a better test to get into med school because they want to go MD. They were really focused on their anxiety. And there's one thing that, you know, like the boomers are always telling us how like, you know, millennials and Gen Z, they're like too spoiled and too like they're complaining and whatever. And not to sound like a boomer, but I was kind of thinking, I was like, dude, you can't pathologize everything to the point where you don't actually work on what it is you need to work on. Because like, dude, life is hard. And hearing the story, was thinking to myself, when I was in college, I was feeling anxious too. So I didn't do a gap year. I was studying for the MCAT between sophomore and junior year. I hadn't taken all my prereqs, but I was like, I think I can still do good on the MCAT. But it was stressful. I was anxious about it. I was anxious about my health. Like my health was, in college was very rocky. I had just been diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease. Not fun. Would not recommend. I was anxious about my family life imploding. Me and my mom and my brother in a 1-bedroom apartment, sharing a single bathroom with IBD, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, if you don't know. Not fun. Wouldn't recommend. I was anxious about a lot of things, but also knew that I had to do some shit for the kind of life that I wanted to live. A bit of a tangent here because I want to give Allison the proper advice about her question. But with this other student who was feeling anxiety about the MCAT, your feelings are just your feelings, and that's okay. Life, unfortunately, is not easy, right? In Buddha, life is suffering. Even though that is not a totally correct translation, you get the point, which is negative emotions are a part of life. And it's not about trying to avoid them or hide from them or run away from them. It's about what do you do about them? How do you manage them? And at the end of the day, I think that usually it means doing the thing that you need to do in spite of your emotions, regardless of what your emotions say. I hated public speaking so much. I got so anxious, but I did it anyway. And I did it enough until, you know what? Now I don't mind. Not a big deal anymore. So, all right, Allison, bringing it back to you. So I did a lot of stress management techniques when I first got sick with IBD because the understanding at that time was that stress can exacerbate your IBD. Then there was research more recently that's like, oh, it doesn't. And then people go back and forth anyways. Jury's still out. However, what I found helpful was breathing exercises, 4, 7, 8. 4 on the inhale, 7 hold, 8 on the exhale. You want to elongate the exhale rather than the inhale. When you inhale, based on the pressure changes in your chest cavity with your diaphragm going down, your heart rate increases. It happens in everyone. It's normal. When you exhale, it decreases. So you want to emphasize the decreased state. That's why you exhale slowly, and you're going to activate more of that parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is your rest and digest versus your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, right? Yeah, that's number 1. Number 2 would be journaling, just like getting all those thoughts, because when the thoughts are bouncing around in your head, you kind of ruminate and you kind of like make these weird connections that don't quite make sense. When you write it out, I just use an app. I use Day One, but you can use paper, pen, whatever. You can get more clarity, and you have to think clearer. You can't make these crazy jumps. You are forced to think more clearly. So that helps. And then when I feel overwhelmed, I just remind myself, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So you just do one step in front of the other. And then that feeling of overwhelm, you wake up the next day, you're like, I feel differently about this. I think I can handle this, And just know that you're not alone. This is a very common thing, very normal thing, especially amongst pre-meds and other driven, young, hopeful professionals. So I hope those techniques work for you. Isle, how to be financially literate. How do I get started? Great question. So 2 things. Number 1, the Unhappy Doctor Solution course, which is for med students, residents, and attendings. If you're one of those and you want to learn more about being financially literate, we have an add-on to the course, which is focused on just financial stuff, like not just financial literacy, but building that foundation, accelerating it, all those things. You can find that linked below. Number 2, the way that I started is I read a lot of books in my last year of med school. I subscribed to the personal finance, financial independence, Bogle Heads subreddits, and consumed a lot of information there for a few years, actually, to really understand it through and through. Whereas now I no longer follow those, and I'm on autopilot. And also watching videos. Ben Felix is a little bit more advanced now. I watch Ben Felix videos from time to time, but I think he probably has some videos that are more beginner focused, but there are probably other YouTubers that are more beginner focused for like financial literacy basics. Ben Felix gets into like the theory of like different types of funds and optimizing small percentage points, which is the stuff that I like to nerd out on. But I think either with the Unhappy Doctor Solution, which is going to give you more doctor-focused techniques, or with this, self-directed learning, you can get into a very good position in terms of financial literacy. All right, fam, I did not get to everyone's questions, but I want to honor those questions and do them right. So I'm going to save them for the next one when I'm not exhausted, because right now I can feel the clarity of my thought is decreasing and just really dropping off a cliff. So we're going to save that for next time. But thank you so much for these questions. They they really get me thinking in a way that is fun. It's great to connect with you all, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Much love.